I'm Rachel, 30 years old, and last month my family ambushed me with an emergency intervention about my failing tech startup. My dad compared me to my perfect sister, while relatives nodded in agreement. But just as I was ready to crumble under their judgment, my mom's phone buzzed with a Wall Street Journal notification that changed everything. Have you ever been judged before someone took the time to understand what you're building? That's exactly what happened when my family gathered to stage an intervention about my failed startup, right before everything changed with one Wall Street Journal notification. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to join our community of dreamers and doers who understand that sometimes the biggest breakthroughs come right when others have given up on you. Growing up in the Bennett household meant one thing: success had a very specific definition. My father, Gregory, a cardiothoracic surgeon, and my mother, Diana, a tenured professor of economics, created an environment where achievement wasn't just encouraged, it was expected. Our family dinners revolved around academic accomplishments, professional milestones, and the carefully charted paths toward conventional success. From an early age, I showed signs of thinking differently. While my sister Emily meticulously followed instructions on her science projects, I was busy reimagining them entirely. When I suggested a completely different approach to my fifth grade science fair project, my father smiled tightly and said, "Rachel, sometimes the tried and true path is best. Look at how well Emily's project turned out when she followed the instructions." That became a familiar refrain throughout my childhood, my creative thinking positioned as a liability rather than an asset. Despite my unconventional thinking, I excelled academically. I graduated with honors from Stanford with a double major in computer science and biomedical engineering. My parents beamed with pride at my graduation, already envisioning my future at Google, Apple, or perhaps following my father into medicine. The path seemed clear: join a prestigious company, climb the corporate ladder, achieve stability and recognition in a well-established field. For 2 years, I did exactly that. I landed a coveted position at a major tech firm, working on their healthcare initiatives. The salary was impressive, the benefits exceptional, and my parents finally had something straightforward to brag about at their country club gatherings. "Our Rachel works at Technolife developing healthcare algorithms," my mother would say, conveniently glossing over my growing discontent. The breaking point came during a project where I witnessed firsthand the struggles of patients with rare diseases trying to find appropriate specialists and clinical trials. The systems in place were fragmented, outdated, and inefficient. Patients were quite literally dying while navigating bureaucratic mazes. I saw an opportunity to create something that could save lives, an AI-driven platform that could match patients with rare conditions to the right specialists and clinical trials, cutting through months or even years of painful searching. When I announced my decision to leave my secure job and launch my own healthcare technology startup, my family's reaction was mixed. My mother expressed cautious support. "If anyone can make it work, it's you, Rachel. Just make sure you have a backup plan." My father was less enthusiastic. "The healthcare industry isn't something you can disrupt overnight. It's complex for a reason." Emily, already climbing the ranks at her law firm, simply asked if my company offered health insurance. In those early days, there was at least a veneer of support. My parents attended my modest launch party, my father even writing a check for my initial seed funding, though he called it an investment rather than a gift, complete with paperwork and projected returns carefully calculated. I named the company Connect Care and brought on Jasmine Washington, a brilliant programmer I'd worked with at Technolife who shared my vision. We rented a tiny office space that doubled as our apartment when we worked too late to go home. Those first months were exhilarating. The freedom to build something meaningful, the late nights coding and refining our algorithm, the moments of breakthrough when a particularly difficult problem suddenly yielded to our persistence. My boyfriend at the time, Timothy Clark, initially seemed supportive. He was an investment banker who liked the idea of dating an entrepreneur, at least in theory. "My girlfriend, the next female tech founder to make it big," he'd say, introducing me at parties. But as months passed without significant external validation of our work, his enthusiasm waned. "I thought this was going to be more of a quick success story," he admitted during one of our increasingly frequent arguments. I'm starting to worry you're throwing away your potential. The first year was challenging, but not unexpectedly so. We secured modest funding from angel investors interested in healthcare innovation. We built our initial platform and began beta testing with a small group of patients. The feedback was promising. We were making connections that genuinely helped people. But the path to profitability remained unclear, and regulatory hurdles emerged at every turn. By the second year, the cracks began to show. 2 major funding rounds fell through at the last minute. Our algorithm needed significant refinement to handle the complexity of matching rare disease presentations with appropriate trials. The regulatory landscape proved even more challenging than anticipated. Timothy finally left, saying he needed someone more stable in his life. My family's initial support had by then curdled into concern, then criticism. Sunday dinners became interrogations about burn rates and user acquisition costs. Holiday gatherings turned into impromptu board meetings where relatives who couldn't explain what an API was nonetheless felt qualified to critique our business model. Emily's steady rise through her law firm provided a convenient counterpoint to my struggling venture. Emily just bought a condo in the city, my mother would mention, while I was still eating ramen in my shared apartment/office. What my family couldn't see were the small victories accumulating beneath the surface. A breakthrough in our matching algorithm that increased accuracy by 37%. A successful pilot program with a mid-sized hospital in Chicago. Promising results from a clinical trial where our platform had connected patients to life-changing treatments. Jasmine and I knew we were onto something important, if we could just secure enough runway to prove it. The family dinners became increasingly uncomfortable as ConnectCare struggled to find stable footing. Each Sunday at my parents' sprawling colonial home in the suburbs, I'd brace myself for the inevitable interrogation. "How's the little startup going?" my father would ask, the word startup somehow sounding diminutive coming from his lips. Before I could properly answer, he'd pivot. "Emily just won the Dalton case. $3 million settlement." My sister would modestly lower her eyes, though I never missed the slight smile that played at the corners of her mouth. Emily, 3 years my senior, had always been the family standard-bearer. Her path had been linear and predictable. Top of her class at Yale Law, clerkship with a federal judge, and now making rapid ascent at Sullivan & Morgan, one of Boston's most prestigious firms. Thanksgiving was particularly brutal. As relatives passed turkey and cranberry sauce, Aunt Patricia turned to me with exaggerated concern. "Are you still doing that computer thing, dear?" I saw a position at Mass General in their administration department. Very stable, excellent benefits. "I'm building a healthcare platform that connects patients with rare diseases to specialists and clinical trials," I explained for what felt like the 100th time. "We're making real progress." Uncle Frank chimed in. "But are you making real money?" The table erupted in laughter while I pushed mashed potatoes around my plate. The crescendo came when Emily announced her promotion to partner during Christmas dinner. Crystal champagne flutes appeared as if by magic, and my father gave a speech that brought tears to my mother's eyes. "Your mother and I always knew you were destined for greatness," he said, raising his glass to Emily. "You've made us so proud by choosing a path of excellence and seeing it through." I clapped along with everyone else, genuinely happy for my sister despite the implicit comparison. When my father caught my eye across the table, he added, "And Rachel, we're sure you'll find your footing too, once you're ready to get serious." January brought a new crisis. Our primary server crashed, taking our platform offline for 3 crucial days. We lost a potential partnership with a research hospital as a result. Our bank account was dwindling, and payroll for our small team of 5 loomed large. After exhausting other options, I swallowed my pride and called my father. We met at his country club, where he sipped scotch and listened to my pitch with clinical detachment. "So you need $50,000 to bridge until your next funding round?" he clarified, examining me over his glasses the way he might assess a resident's questionable diagnosis. "It's a loan, not a gift," I emphasized. "We have a meeting with Horizon Ventures next month. Their portfolio specifically focuses on healthcare technology, and they've expressed serious interest." My father set down his glass. "Rachel, I've supported your adventure for 2 years now. Your mother and I are concerned that you're trapped in a cycle of almost but never quite making it. Have you considered that it might be time to cut your losses? Dad, we're so close to a breakthrough. Our algorithm is performing better than anything on the market. We just need a little more time. He sighed heavily. I'll discuss it with your mother, but I think what you need isn't more money. It's a reality check. 2 days later, I received a text from my mother. Family emergency meeting this Saturday at 4 p.m. Please come to the house. It's important. When I called to ask what was happening, she was evasive. Your father feels we all need to talk about your situation. Emily will be there too. That night, I stayed late at our office, working on refinements to our matching algorithm. At 2 a.m., I had a breakthrough that increased our accuracy to nearly 95% for certain rare conditions. I texted Jasmine, who called me immediately despite the hour. This could be it, Rachel, she said, her voice vibrating with excitement. With this improvement, we can finally demonstrate real clinical impact at scale. I know, I said, feeling a mixture of elation and dread. But my family's called some kind of intervention about the business for Saturday. They're going to try to convince me to shut it down. There was a pause on the line. Are you considering it? Jasmine finally asked, her voice careful. I stared at my computer screen, where the results of our latest simulation showed unprecedented accuracy in matching patients with myasthenia gravis to appropriate clinical trials. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me is so tired of fighting everyone. My ex, my family, investors who don't get our vision. But what about the patients? Jasmine asked quietly. What about Eliza? She was referring to a 12-year-old with a rare form of muscular dystrophy who had accessed a life-changing clinical trial through our platform during the Chicago pilot. I closed my eyes, remembering Eliza's mother's tearful video call, thanking us for giving her daughter a chance when traditional medical channels had failed them. I know, I whispered. I just need to get through this family meeting one last time to see if I can make them understand. And if not, we'll figure it out, Jasmine promised. We always do. Saturday arrived too quickly. As I drove to my parents' house, I rehearsed explanations, justifications, and pleas that I knew would likely fall on deaf ears. Whatever happened at this emergency meeting, I sensed it would mark a turning point, though I had no idea just how dramatic that turn would be. I pulled into my parents' circular driveway at exactly 4 p.m. on Saturday, immediately noticing more cars than expected. This wasn't just my immediate family. There were at least 5 additional vehicles. My stomach tightened as I recognized Uncle Frank's Mercedes and Aunt Patricia's SUV. This wasn't a meeting, it was an ambush. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. My mother stood there, her expression a complicated mixture of sympathy and determination. Rachel, sweetie, she said, hugging me briefly. Everyone's waiting in the living room. Everyone, I echoed. Mom, what exactly is happening here? She avoided my eyes. Your father feels it's important that we all talk openly about your situation. The living room fell silent as I entered. The scene was surreal, like walking into my own intervention on a daytime talk show. My father stood by the fireplace, clearly positioned as the authority figure. Emily sat primly on the sofa, a legal pad balanced on her knee. Around the room, strategically placed in various armchairs and love seats, were my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Frank, my father's colleague Dr. Winston and his wife Margaret, my godmother Judith, and to my shock, my mother's financial advisor Bradley. What is this? I asked, remaining standing despite the conspicuously empty seat placed directly across from my father. My father cleared his throat. Rachel, please sit down. We've gathered as a family because we're concerned about the path you've chosen. And Bradley is family now? I asked, nodding toward the financial advisor who had the decency to look uncomfortable. Bradley is here to offer professional perspective, my father responded smoothly. Please sit. Reluctantly, I took the seat, feeling like a defendant facing a jury. My father had clearly rehearsed his speech. For 2 years, we've supported your entrepreneurial experiment. We've watched you pour your savings, your time, your relationships, and your talents into a venture that shows no signs of viability. As a family, we can no longer stand by while you waste your potential and jeopardize your future. Uncle Frank nodded vigorously. Your father asked me to look at your business plan, Rachel. The burn rate is unsustainable without significant investment, which hasn't materialized after 2 years. That's usually a market signal. You showed him our confidential business documents? I asked my father incredulously. I showed him what you showed me when you asked for $50,000, my father replied. And Frank agrees the outlook isn't promising. Aunt Patricia leaned forward. Honey, no one's saying you aren't smart or hardworking. But sometimes the smartest thing is knowing when to cut your losses. I have a friend at Massachusetts General Hospital. I don't want to work at Mass General, I interrupted. Our platform is finally showing real clinical impact. We're helping patients with rare diseases find treatments that could save their lives. But is it financially viable? Bradley asked gently. Even the most altruistic venture needs a sustainable model. We're pre-revenue by design, I explained, feeling like I was speaking a foreign language they couldn't understand. We're building the network and refining the algorithm before full-scale monetization. It's standard for this type of platform. Dr. Winston shook his head. I've seen many medical innovations fail not because they weren't good ideas, but because they couldn't navigate the regulatory landscape and financial realities of healthcare. My godmother Judith, who had remained silent, finally spoke. Rachel, we're worried about you personally, too. Timothy was such a lovely young man, and your mother tells me you hardly date anymore. You're working all hours, living in your office. Timothy left because he wanted to date a status symbol, not an actual person with ambitions, I retorted, my composure slipping. And my personal life isn't up for family debate. Emily, who had been scribbling notes, looked up. I've taken the liberty of drafting some options for you, she said, her tone professionally sympathetic. I have contacts at several tech firms who would be interested in someone with your background. You could leverage your startup experience as an asset rather than a liability in the job market. That's very thoughtful, Emily, I said tightly, but I'm not looking for a job. I have one. I'm the CEO of a company that's doing important work. My mother, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, touched my arm. Sweetheart, we know you believe in what you're doing, but you've always been so idealistic. Sometimes reality doesn't match our dreams, and that's not failure, it's life. I looked around the room at these people who claimed to love me yet couldn't see or respect the vision that drove me. Our algorithm just achieved 95% matching accuracy for certain conditions. Do you know what that means? It means patients who would otherwise spend years searching for appropriate treatment can find it in days. It means lives saved. My father sighed heavily. Rachel, everyone wants to save the world when they're young. But there are established channels for medical innovation for a reason. If your idea had merit, wouldn't the market have validated it by now? The market is broken, I insisted. That's exactly why we're building this. And we do have validation from patients, from doctors at our pilot hospitals, from clinical researchers. But not from investors with actual money, my father countered. Not from people who understand business rather than idealism. Emily nodded in agreement. Rachel, I admire your passion, but passion doesn't pay bills. I've worked systematically toward partnership for 8 years. It took discipline, strategic choices, and sometimes putting aside what I wanted in the moment for the bigger picture. My father gestured toward Emily, his face lighting up with unmistakable pride. Exactly. Your sister made partner while you play entrepreneur. The words hit like physical blows. The room fell uncomfortably silent as everyone absorbed the harshness of my father's statement. I felt tears threatening but refused to let them fall. I stood up, gathering my purse. I think we're done here, I said quietly. Rachel, don't be dramatic, my father started. We're trying to help you. No, I responded, finding strength in the clarity of the moment. You're trying to make me into something I'm not. You've never understood what I'm building because you've never really tried to understand. My mother looked pained. Rachel, please. Your father just wants what's best for you. He wants what he thinks is best for me, I corrected. There's a difference. As I turned to leave, the strangest thing happened. My mother's phone buzzed loudly in her pocket. She automatically reached for it, glancing down at the notification. Her expression changed from concern to confusion. Diana, we're in the middle of something important, my father admonished. But my mother was staring at her phone screen, then looking up at me with widening eyes. Gregory, she said slowly, you might want to see this. What could possibly be more important than this family discussion? My father asked impatiently. My mother looked directly at me as she read aloud from her phone. Why is your company valued at $1 billion in the Wall Street Journal? The room froze. Every eye turned to me, expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief. What? I managed, my voice barely audible. My mother looked back at her phone, blinking rapidly. It's a Wall Street Journal news alert. Healthcare startup Connect Care valued at $1 billion in potential acquisition talks with Pharmatech Global. She looked up at me. Rachel, is this your company? I couldn't process what I was hearing. Pharmatech Global was one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And while we had been in early discussions with their innovation department about potential collaboration, nothing remotely close to acquisition talks had been mentioned, let alone a $1 billion valuation. I need to see that, I said, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. My mother handed me her phone, and I stared at the headline in disbelief. Emily was already pulling out her own phone. Is this some kind of mistake? She asked, the professional skepticism in her voice unable to mask her shock. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the article. According to the Wall Street Journal's healthcare technology reporter, Madeline Torres, Pharmatech Global was in advanced talks to acquire Connect Care for an estimated $1 billion, primarily for our revolutionary patient matching algorithm that demonstrates unprecedented accuracy in connecting rare disease patients with appropriate clinical trials. The article went on to quote an unnamed source within Pharmatech, saying that our technology could revolutionize clinical trial recruitment and potentially save the pharmaceutical industry billions in failed trial costs while dramatically accelerating rare disease treatment development. As I read, I became aware of several things simultaneously. My phone was vibrating constantly in my purse. The room around me had erupted into confused chatter. And my father had moved to read over my shoulder, his expression shifting from dismissal to astonishment. Rachel, he said, his voice entirely different now. Is this accurate? I finally checked my own phone. 17 missed calls from Jasmine. 5 from our lawyer, Samuel. 3 from a number I didn't recognize with a New York area code. Dozens of text messages and email notifications. I don't know, I admitted. We've been in talks with Pharmatech about a potential partnership, but nothing like this. I need to call Jasmine. I stepped out onto the porch, my hands shaking as I called my business partner. She answered on the first ring. Rachel. Finally. Have you seen it? Jasmine's voice was pitched higher than normal with excitement. The Wall Street Journal article? Yes, I just saw it. What's happening, Jasmine? We weren't in acquisition talks. We are now, she said breathlessly. Daniel Rodriguez from Pharmatech called right after our breakthrough last night. He said their team has been monitoring our progress, and the accuracy improvements put us over their threshold for serious interest. When I told him we were hitting 95% match rates for certain conditions, he almost fell off his chair. I gripped the porch railing for support. But $1 billion? That's insane. It's our algorithm, Jasmine explained rapidly. You know how Pharmatech spent $3.7 billion on clinical trials last year? And how over 80% of trials failed to recruit enough patients. Our system solves their most expensive problem. Daniel said their internal valuation shows we could save them more than $2 billion annually while accelerating their drug development pipeline by years. My mind flashed back to all those late nights, the endless iterations of code, the meetings with patients and doctors to understand the real-world problems we were trying to solve. All those moments when we felt like we were shouting into the void, trying to convince people that what we were building mattered. But how did the Wall Street Journal find out? I asked. We haven't agreed to anything. That's the thing, Jasmine said, her voice dropping. I think Pharmatech leaked it. Samuel thinks they're trying to establish a public valuation to justify the purchase to their board and shareholders. He's been going crazy trying to reach you. We need to meet with the legal team immediately. I glanced back through the window at my family, who were huddled around Emily's phone, presumably reading the full article. I'm at my parents' house. They were staging an intervention to convince me to shut down the company. Jasmine was silent for a moment. You're kidding. I wish I was, I said, a strange laugh bubbling up. My father just told everyone that my sister made partner while I play entrepreneur. Then my mom got the news alert. Oh my God, Jasmine whispered. That's actually kind of perfect timing. Despite everything, I smiled. It really is. Then, becoming serious again. I'll head to the office now. Call Samuel and tell him I'll be there in 30 minutes. When I stepped back into the living room, the atmosphere had transformed completely. My father was on his phone, apparently reading the article himself. Emily was explaining something about unicorn valuations to our aunt and uncle. My mother was simply staring at me with wide eyes. I need to go, I announced. There's apparently a situation I need to address with my team. My father looked up. Rachel, why didn't you tell us your company was in talks with Pharmatech Global? Because we weren't in acquisition talks until, apparently, today, I replied honestly. And even our partnership discussions were under NDA. Non-disclosure agreement. Emily translated for the room unnecessarily. Bradley, the financial advisor who had been ready to explain why my business was doomed minutes earlier, now stepped forward with an outstretched hand. Congratulations, Rachel. What an extraordinary achievement. I didn't take his hand. Thank you, but I really need to go. Of course, my father said quickly. This is obviously an important business matter. We didn't mean to keep you from something so significant. The irony was almost too much to bear. I looked around at the room full of people who had gathered specifically to convince me to abandon my vision. Actually, that's exactly what this meeting was designed to do, I said quietly. My father had the grace to look uncomfortable. Rachel, we were concerned. We didn't have all the information. No, I agreed. You didn't. But you were quite comfortable making judgments anyway. I turned to leave, then paused. I'll let you all know how things develop. Right now, I need to speak with my team and our lawyers. As I walked out the door, I heard my mother call after me. Rachel, wait. She hurried down the front steps after me. I just want to say, I'm proud of you. I always have been. I looked at her, seeing the sincerity in her eyes, but also remembering her silence during my father's dismissal of my work. Thanks, Mom, I said simply, unable to fully process my complicated feelings in that moment. As I drove toward our office, my phone continued to buzz with notifications. The story was spreading beyond the Wall Street Journal now, with TechCrunch, Bloomberg, and other outlets picking it up. Our website traffic had increased by 3,000% in the past hour. I thought about all the times I'd doubted myself over the past 2 years. The nights I'd lain awake wondering if everyone else was right, if I was being foolishly idealistic, if I was wasting my potential. I thought about Timothy walking out, saying he needed someone more stable. I thought about my father's dismissive tone when he talked about my little startup. Then I thought about Eliza, the 12-year-old who had accessed a life-changing clinical trial through our platform. I thought about Jasmine's unwavering belief in our vision, even when investors turned us down. I thought about the breakthrough we'd achieved just last night, not knowing it would trigger the tsunami. My entire life was about to change, I realized. And ironically, it was happening just hours after my family had gathered to stage an intervention about my failure. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of conference calls, emergency meetings, and hastily arranged flights. Our tiny office transformed into a command center as we brought in our lawyers, financial advisors, and key team members to address the sudden spotlight on ConnectCare. The first call with Daniel Rodriguez of Pharmatech confirmed what Jasmine had told me. They were indeed serious about acquisition talks, though they hadn't intended for the news to leak quite so dramatically. Their legal team was handling the premature disclosure, but now that the cat was out of the bag, they wanted to accelerate our discussions. "Your timing couldn't have been better with that algorithm breakthrough," Daniel said during our video conference. "Our clinical research team validated your results this morning. It's exactly what we've been looking for." By Sunday evening, we had a preliminary term sheet from Pharmatech outlining a potential acquisition valued at $950 million in cash and stock options. Samuel, our lawyer, pointed out that this was less than the billion-dollar figure mentioned in the media. "They're testing to see if the publicity has gone to your heads," he explained. "Standard negotiation tactic. They know the technology is worth more than this, especially with the publicity driving up perceived value." Jasmine and I spent that night reviewing every detail of Pharmatech's proposal. "The question isn't just about the money," Jasmine said, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep. "It's about control. If we sell outright, we can't guarantee they'll use the technology the way we intended." She was right. The algorithm we'd built wasn't just a clever piece of technology, it was a mission to fundamentally change how patients with rare diseases access treatment. In the wrong hands, it could become just another tool for pharmaceutical profit maximization rather than patient benefit. By Monday morning, my phone was ringing constantly with calls from family members I hadn't heard from in years. Second cousins, my father's former colleagues. Even Timothy tried to reach me, his text message a masterpiece of casual reconnection that made no mention of how he'd walked out when things got tough. "Heard about your success. Always knew you had it in you. Coffee sometime." I left it unanswered. My mother called 3 times before I finally picked up Monday afternoon. "Rachel, we just want to know you're okay," she said, her voice tentative. "It's been all over the news. Your father's colleagues are calling to ask about you." "I'm fine, Mom," I replied, trying to keep the edge from my voice. "Just extremely busy." Of course," she said quickly. "We don't want to bother you. But your father would like to talk to you. He feels terrible about Saturday." I closed my eyes, remembering the look on his face as he proclaimed that Emily had made partner while I played entrepreneur. The memory still stung, despite everything that had happened since. "I can't talk to him right now," I said finally. "I'm in the middle of the most important business negotiations of my life. Tell him I'll call when things settle down." There was a pause. "He's very proud of you, Rachel." "Now he is," I couldn't help saying. "Now that other people have validated what I'm doing." My mother didn't argue the point. "Will you at least let us know what you decide? About the acquisition?" "Yes," I promised. "I'll keep you updated." That evening, as Jasmine and I were reviewing a counterproposal with Samuel, there was a knock at our office door. To my astonishment, Emily stood there, holding a bottle of champagne and looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Your secretary let me up," she explained, though we didn't have a secretary. "I thought you might need a break, and maybe some legal perspective from someone who's on your side." I hesitated, still feeling the sting of her participation in the intervention. "I brought the good stuff," she added, lifting the champagne. Dom Perignon. Partner-level celebration material. Despite myself, I smiled. "Come in." Emily sat with us for the next 3 hours, reviewing Pharmatech's terms with the sharp eye of a corporate attorney. She pointed out several clauses that would have limited our future involvement with the technology after acquisition. "If maintaining control of how your technology is used matters to you," she said, looking between Jasmine and me, "you should be pushing for a partnership structure, not a complete acquisition. Let them license the technology while you maintain ownership and oversight." Jasmine looked at me, eyebrows raised. "That's actually brilliant." "It would mean less money up front," Emily cautioned, "but potentially more control and more long-term value if the technology performs as well as you believe it will." I studied my sister, seeing her in a new light. "Why are you helping us like this?" Emily set down her champagne glass. "Because I was wrong," she said simply. "I bought into Dad's perspective without really understanding what you were building. And because you're my sister, and I don't want you to get screwed in the biggest deal of your life just because tech acquisitions are my specialty." The next morning, We presented a counterproposal to Pharmatech, a strategic partnership instead of an acquisition, with a licensing structure that would provide immediate capital while allowing us to maintain control over the core technology and its implementation. To our surprise, Daniel Rodriguez didn't immediately reject the idea. "Let me take this to the board," he said. They were interested in acquisition for the simplified structure, but your technology is unique enough that they might consider alternatives. On Wednesday afternoon, my father appeared at our office. He stood awkwardly in the reception area, looking out of place among the whiteboards covered in code and the young programmers rushing about. "Rachel," he said when I emerged from my office, "could we speak privately?" I led him to a small conference room and closed the door. For a moment, neither of us spoke. "I owe you an apology," he finally said. "I was wrong about your company, about your vision." "Yes, you were." I agreed, not making it easier for him. He nodded, accepting this. "I've spent my career working within established systems. When you talked about disrupting healthcare matching, I couldn't see it because I've only ever experienced the traditional pathways. But I've been reading about what you've built. It's remarkable. Coming from my father, this was significant." "Thank you," I said simply. "Your mother and I." He hesitated. "We were afraid for you. The startup world is so uncertain, and we've seen how hard you've been working with seemingly little to show for it." "But that's how innovation works, Dad," I explained. "There's a long period where you're building and refining and testing, and nothing seems to be happening from the outside. Then suddenly, everything changes." He nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand that. I just want you to know that regardless of what happens with Pharmatech, I am proud of what you've created." The words I'd wanted to hear for so long now felt bittersweet. "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "But I wish you could have been proud of the work itself, not just the valuation or the public recognition." My father looked down at his hands. "That's fair. I have some learning to do about how I measure success." He looked up again. "For what it's worth, I think you should maintain control of your technology. From what I understand about your platform, it has the potential to help many patients. That shouldn't be lost in corporate acquisition." As he left, I felt a complex mixture of emotions, vindication, lingering hurt, but also the first tentative steps toward a new understanding between us. That evening, Pharmatech came back with their response. They would agree to a partnership structure with a $500 million upfront payment for exclusive licensing rights, plus performance-based incentives that could ultimately exceed the original acquisition offer. Most importantly, ConnectCare would maintain ownership of our core technology and have contractual guarantees about how it would be implemented. Jasmine and I looked at each other across the conference table. "What do you think?" she asked. I thought about all we had built, all we had sacrificed. I thought about my family's intervention and the dramatic reversal that followed. I thought about patients like Eliza, who needed our technology to reach its full potential. "I think we've built something too important to sell completely," I said finally. "I think we take the partnership deal and keep building." Jasmine grinned. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." 3 months later, ConnectCare had transformed beyond recognition. Our new headquarters occupied 3 floors of a sleek downtown building, a far cry from the cramped office apartment where Jasmine and I had spent countless sleepless nights. Our team had grown from 5 to 50, with specialized departments for algorithm development, patient advocacy, clinical partnership, and regulatory compliance. The $500 million licensing payment from Pharmatech had provided immediate stability while allowing us to maintain ownership and direction of our technology. The partnership structure had proven even more valuable than we anticipated. Pharmatech's global reach and regulatory expertise accelerated our implementation timeline by years, while our continued innovation kept improving the core matching algorithm. Most importantly, we were helping patients. Within 3 months of our expanded launch, we had successfully matched over 5,000 patients with rare diseases to appropriate specialists or clinical trials. The testimonials flooded in daily, families who had spent years searching for answers finally finding paths forward through our platform. The personal changes were just as dramatic. I had purchased a comfortable condo in the city, nothing ostentatious, but a genuine home rather than a converted office space with a mattress on the floor. Jasmine had paid off her parents' mortgage and set up college funds for her nieces and nephews. We were both still working intense hours, but now from a place of choice rather than desperate necessity. My relationship with my family had evolved into something more complex, but ultimately healthier. The monthly dinners at my parents' house had resumed, but the dynamic had shifted significantly. "Pass the potatoes, will you, Rachel?" my father asked during one such dinner in June. "I was reading about your expansion into European markets." Impressive regulatory navigation. "Thanks, Dad," I said, passing the dish. "Our compliance team has been working closely with the EU health authorities. It's complex, but we're making progress." Emily, who had recently taken on some pro bono work for patient advocacy groups, chimed in. "The European privacy laws around patient data are particularly challenging. How are you handling the GDPR compliance?" The conversation flowed into a technical discussion of international healthcare regulations, territory where my father and sister were genuinely interested and engaged rather than dismissive. My mother watched with a small smile, occasionally contributing but mostly seeming content to witness this new family dynamic. After dinner, my father invited me into his study, once an intimidating space where he would deliver assessments of my life choices, now more neutral territory. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation when I came to your office," he said, settling into his leather chair. "About measuring success differently." I nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I read about a patient in Cleveland who accessed an experimental treatment through your platform," he said. "A 7-year-old with progressive muscular atrophy who had been declined for 3 previous trials. The article mentioned that doctors estimated she would have had less than a year left without this treatment." "Sophie Richardson," I confirmed. "Her case was particularly challenging because her genetic variant didn't fit the typical profile. Our algorithm identified subtle patterns that matched her with a trial that had more flexible inclusion criteria." My father was quiet for a moment. "That's the kind of success that matters, isn't it? Not just valuations and acquisitions." "It's why we built Connect Care," I said simply. "The business success enables us to help more patients, but the patients are the point." He nodded slowly. "I'm beginning to understand that better." He cleared his throat. "Your old boyfriend called me at the hospital last week." "Timothy?" I asked, surprised. "Yes. Apparently, he couldn't reach you directly, wanted to reconnect, and thought I might facilitate." My father's expression was carefully neutral, but I detected a hint of something protective. "And what did you tell him?" A small smile played at the corner of my father's mouth. "I told him my daughter is running a successful global healthcare platform and is extremely selective about her time commitments." I couldn't help but laugh. "Thank you for that." The doorbell rang, and moments later, my mother appeared at the study door. "Rachel, there's a Madeline Torres here to see you. She says you were expecting her." Madeline Torres, the Wall Street Journal reporter whose article had changed everything, had reached out requesting an interview about the impact of Connect Care's technology on rare disease treatment. After careful consideration, I had agreed, suggesting she join us for dessert after our family dinner. "Yes, we had arranged to meet here," I confirmed, standing up. "She's writing a follow-up piece." My father raised his eyebrows. "Brave to invite the press to a family gathering." I smiled. "I think we can handle it." Madeline turned out to be nothing like the intimidating media personality I had imagined. In her early 30s, with curly hair and bright, intelligent eyes, she asked thoughtful questions about both the technology and the human impact of our work. "What surprised me about your story," she said as we settled in the living room with coffee and my mother's apple pie, "was how you maintained control rather than taking the larger acquisition offer. That's unusual in the tech world, especially for a first-time founder." "The technology we built serves a specific purpose," I explained. "We were concerned that purpose might get lost in a complete acquisition." "Rachel has always been principled," my mother interjected proudly. "Even as a child." Madeline smiled. "And how has the partnership structure worked out in practice?" "Better than we anticipated," I admitted. Pharmatech brings resources and reach that would have taken us years to develop independently, while we maintain the core innovation that makes the system effective. And the personal impact? Madeline asked, her gaze direct. Your life must have changed dramatically over the past few months. I considered this. Externally, yes. We have proper offices now, a growing team, financial stability. But the core of what we're doing, connecting patients with life-changing treatments, that's the same mission we started with. As the evening wound down, Emily walked Madeline out while I helped my mother clear the dessert plates. You handled that interview beautifully, my mother said, rinsing a cup. Very poised. Thanks, Mom, I replied. It gets easier with practice. She set down the cup and turned to face me. I want to apologize again for that intervention. We were so wrong, and in such a public, hurtful way. I leaned against the counter. Why didn't you say anything that day? Before the Wall Street Journal notification? You just sat there while Dad and everyone else picked apart my choices. My mother sighed deeply. I was caught between what your father believed was best and what I feared might be true. I was worried about you working so hard with so little recognition. But I should have spoken up. You should have, I agreed. I know, she said quietly. But I want you to know I always believed in you, Rachel. Even when I was afraid for you. I reached out and squeezed her hand. I know, Mom. And we're finding a better way forward now. Later that night, as I drove back to my condo, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 months. The technology we had built was helping people in ways we had always envisioned but had struggled to make others see. The validation had come, both financially and in terms of impact, but the vindication felt less important now than the work itself. My phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. Just got the European regulatory preliminary approval. We can start the EU pilot next month. Another milestone reached. Another step toward the vision we had held onto through 2 difficult years of doubt and dismissal. As I pulled into my parking space, I felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for the success, but for the struggle that had shaped both our technology and my own resilience along the way. 1 year after the Wall Street Journal article that changed everything, Connect Care had evolved beyond what Jasmine and I had dared to imagine in those early days working from our converted apartment office. Our patient matching platform, now operated in 12 countries, had facilitated over 20,000 rare disease treatment connections and had become the gold standard for clinical trial recruitment. The financial success was undeniable. Our partnership with Pharmatech had exceeded performance metrics, triggering additional payments that brought our total compensation close to the original billion-dollar valuation. Jasmine and I had both become wealthy by any reasonable standard, though we remained actively involved in the company's operations and strategic direction. But the true measure of our success wasn't in bank accounts or valuations. It was in the emails, letters, and video messages that arrived daily from patients and families whose lives had been transformed through connections made on our platform. One Tuesday morning, I sat in our glass-walled conference room reviewing quarterly performance data when my assistant, Amanda, knocked gently. There's someone here to see you, she said. A Sophia Richardson and her mother. They don't have an appointment, but they were very hoping to meet you personally. I recognized the name immediately. The 7-year-old with progressive muscular atrophy, whose case I had mentioned to my father months earlier. Please send them in, I said, closing my laptop. The girl who walked through the door looked nothing like the frail child I had seen in medical files. Sophia Richardson had bright eyes, pink-tinged cheeks, and moved with the careful but determined steps of someone regaining strength. Her mother, Catherine, followed close behind, her expression a mixture of gratitude and wonder. Miss Bennett, Catherine began, her voice catching. We just wanted to thank you in person. The clinical trial your system matched Sophia with, the doctors are calling her response miraculous. Sophia looked up at me solemnly. Mom says your computer is magic and found the medicine that fixed my muscles. I knelt to her level. Not magic, just very good at finding the right matches. But I'm so happy it helped you. Me too, she said simply. I can go to school now. And dance class starts next week. The Richardsons stayed for nearly an hour. Catherine explained the transformation in clinical terms, how the gene therapy they'd accessed through our platform had halted the progression of Sophia's disease and begun to reverse some of the damage. But it was the small details that moved me most. Sophia's excitement about joining a ballet class, her plans for Halloween, the ordinary childhood experiences that had seemed impossible a year earlier. After they left, I sat quietly in my office, processing the encounter. This was why we had persevered through 2 years of doubt and dismissal. This was what my family hadn't been able to see when they gathered for their intervention. My phone rang, Emily calling. Our relationship had evolved into something stronger and more equal over the past year. She had even helped establish a legal advocacy division within Connect Care that provided pro bono support to patients navigating insurance denials and treatment access issues. "Are we still on for dinner tonight?" she asked when I picked up. "Dad's presenting some award at the Medical Association, so it's just us." "Absolutely," I confirmed. "I just met Sophia Richardson and her mother. Remember that case I told you about? The 7-year-old? That's amazing, Rachel. Bring the details tonight. I want to hear everything." Later that evening, over dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown, I told Emily about the Richardsons' visit. "It's extraordinary what you've built," she said when I finished. "Not just the technology, but the entire ecosystem around it." "We've been lucky," I acknowledged. Emily shook her head firmly. "No. That's what Dad would say to minimize what you've accomplished. This isn't luck. It's vision, persistence, and courage to keep going when everyone, including your family, told you to stop." I smiled at her directness. "When did you become my biggest defender?" "Probably around the time I realized how wrong I'd been," she admitted. "And watching you navigate this past year with such grace and focus, it's been inspiring, honestly." We talked about the mentorship program I had recently established for women entrepreneurs in healthcare technology. 10 promising founders were receiving funding, guidance, and access to our network, resources that would have made all the difference during our difficult early years. "I remember when you first told us you were leaving your job to start Connect Care," Emily said thoughtfully. "Dad was horrified, but I was secretly envious." This surprised me. "Envious? You were already on the partner track at a prestigious firm." "Exactly," she said. "I was on a track someone else had laid out. You were creating something entirely new." She sipped her wine. "I never had the courage to deviate from the expected path." "It's not too late," I pointed out. "Your work with our legal advocacy division has made a huge difference for patients." She nodded slowly. "It has. It's the most meaningful work I've done." Our conversation shifted to family matters, our father's gradual but significant evolution in how he viewed success, our mother's delight in telling her academic colleagues about Connect Care's impact, the upcoming holiday gatherings that no longer filled me with dread. As we were finishing dessert, my phone buzzed with a notification. I glanced down and couldn't help but laugh. "What is it?" Emily asked. "Timothy. Again. Apparently, he's launched some kind of investment advisory service and wants to explore synergies with Connect Care." Emily rolled her eyes. The audacity of mediocre men never ceases to amaze me. I put my phone away without responding. Timothy's reappearance in my life, or attempts at it, had become a running joke between Jasmine and me. The man who couldn't see the value in what we were building when it mattered now couldn't stop trying to associate himself with our success. Walking back to my car after dinner, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past 3 years. The struggle that had seemed so lonely at times had ultimately led to something far more meaningful than just personal success. We had built a technology that was changing lives, a company culture that valued innovation and compassion equally, and a model for how healthcare technology could prioritize patient outcomes alongside business viability. The family intervention that had felt so painful had become, in retrospect, the turning point that launched us into a new phase of growth and impact. Sometimes the lowest moments truly do precede the greatest breakthroughs. Back at home, I stood on my balcony overlooking the city lights, thinking about all the lessons this journey had taught me. True vision requires the courage to pursue what others cannot yet see. Validation from those who matter most sometimes comes later than we hope, but our worth doesn't depend on their recognition. Success isn't just about financial outcomes, but about the lives changed through our work. The path to meaningful innovation is rarely straight or smooth, and the darkest moments often come just before breakthrough. And perhaps most importantly, we must define success on our own terms rather than accepting others' limited definitions. What dream are you pursuing that others might not understand yet? What vision keeps you going despite doubters or critics? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. We all need reminders that perseverance matters, especially when the path seems darkest. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to join our community of dreamers, innovators, and people who refuse to give up on their vision. And if you know someone facing their own version of a family intervention about their dreams, share this video to remind them that sometimes breakthrough is just one moment away from breakdown. Thank you for watching, and remember, the most meaningful success often comes after the moments when others have given up on you.